All right, we are recording. Hi, Joe.
Hey, how's it going, Jake?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Yeah, I'm good.
So this is Joe from OmniPoke. Guy knows so much about Pokemon. I'm happy to talk to him again today. Uh, we interviewed him earlier on our channel to talk about sort of what it's like to be a competitive player and get a little bit of like somewhat beginner information, I think, on the playable side of the hobby. But Joe is also like a really avid collector, and so I wanted to have him back on, and Joe agreed to come back on where we could just have a casual discussion about what it's like to be a collector in this environment. You know, I've had a lot of finance talk on this channel, which was why I started the channel, mainly to help people kind of navigate the financial side, make money, and then put it back into to build their collections. But I feel like right now there needs to be more videos. There's so many of those finance videos. I thought it'd be great to talk with a fellow collector and get his take and opinions on what it's like for him in this market. So, Joe, if you want to take it away with that.
Yeah, well, obviously, I've been collecting for 12 years. That's kind of my background. I've basically always had the mentality of a collector this whole time. So I've only just been going out for cards that I like. It's been a spend rather than an invest for the most part. So I've not been necessarily tactical along the way. But there's obviously been this big price wave that's happened right now. And it has, for the first time, made me kind of take a step back and really like reevaluate every single decision that I'm having to make in Pokemon now. Whereas previously I felt that it was these were such low numbers at times where you could quite easily justify to yourself a little bit of spending money here or there towards something. You know, you could say, you know, people spend, you know, £20 or £30 or whatever a month or a week just going to the pub or going and having a coffee every morning. And if you just set that stuff aside for Pokemon cards instead, that's just your little thing. And now it's not 20 or £30 a week. It's significantly more for cards that you want. So it's quite different out there right now, and really unknown for a lot of us, I think.
What's your take just from having, you know, I know you have a number of friends who collect Pokemon and you've been in this hobby for a long time. And so you're pretty connected with what people are talking about. And I know you watch like the big channels and you see what they're saying, but you also watch so many smaller channels and have so many connections. I think your insight on this topic would be really good, which is how do you think people are feeling? Like your average collector type who maybe does a little bit of the investing, but is mostly a collector, and, you know, has either sold cards that they maybe wish they hadn't, or hasn't completed the collections that they wanted to. How are they feeling in this environment, do you think?
I think remorse is a big thing. I think people regret not buying cards that they now really still desire, but then don't want to have those huge price tags put towards it and don't want to have to commit as much as they would have to these days towards cards. Which is something to get a grip on, and also just something that you have to realize that you may have to re-establish some goals that you may have set for your last 10 years this whole time, and it's now like immediately overnight almost out of reach. I mean, not overnight, but you know what I mean. It's been a very, very fast pace in regards to how prices have moved. But I also think there's a lot of seller's remorse out there as well. There were people who were trying to, you know, flip cards and stuff like that, thinking that they had a good grasp on the market, and what they thought made sense to them now is completely alien to them. So people may not be able to access cards that they thought that they were working towards in the first place if they were just flipping cards even, or just feel that they regret selling a card for the price they did sell at now that they see how much more valuable it is. Obviously you want to get the best price for your cards or whatever that you are selling. So it can feel, you know, you can feel a little bit helpless knowing that you got such a, you know, that you let someone else have such a steal, and now you're left with a much less amount of money than you could have had in this new environment.
Yeah. Do you feel like do you know anyone who's sort of like left the hobby or is considering leaving the hobby or is feeling quite discouraged because of that?
I know a lot of people are holding off. I wouldn't say they're like leaving the hobby. I'd say most people are just taking a monitoring approach and saying like, Hopefully there's a bit of a deflation at some point, because at the moment I'm just like, this isn't me personally, but some people are just holding out the storm and saying that it may not be forever. I might be able to jump back in at this point or another. But at the moment they're just completely backing off and just letting stuff kind of happen. But even holding off comes with some anxiety, right? Because you think, what if it goes even higher? Then I'll never, ever get these things. And that FOMO is maybe an underlying factor for some of the prices that we're even seeing right now, especially for popular species. I feel like that can be a really big deal, that people have greatly desired certain key pieces that could be, like their trophy card at whatever price point that is. So I do think there's an element of anxiety going behind some of these prices as well.
Yeah. I know for me, I think that I definitely miss being able to purchase things inexpensively. I also really enjoyed the hunt of finding items that people missed, because even though when I started in about 2017, it was different than it had been in the past, in terms of like, there were a lot of new people who came in because of like the Pokemon Go bubble, as people talk about, and evolutions. But like, I would get these like really great auction steals, and I miss buying.
Yeah.
Just to be completely honest, like, I miss that hunt, I miss that chase, and I miss the fun of doing that stuff. And I think that it's sort of like, well, it's nice that my card values have gone up, I guess, but to be honest, like, it's putting me in a bit of like a psychological pressure cooker, I feel like, for me. And I don't know how you feel about it. I know you just got a ton of amazing cards graded and now have all this value. I mean, potential value if you were to sell. And I think you've told me you're in the past that you're not interested in selling. But I think for me, I feel pressure to sell that I never expected to feel, because of the extreme, like, for me, it's all about how fast it went up. I was expecting it to go up, but the fact that it went up so fast, I think, causes a lot of like psychological ripple effects in the community, and causes a lot of people a lot of stress and anxiety on both sides, whether you have the cards and should you sell them, or, should I buy these cards now, or is the price is going to retrace? Or, as you said, there's going to be that fear of missing out on the other side of like, this is the only time, because literally all these WotC PSA 10 first edition cards are going to disappear. And this is my childhood card, and I want it. The other side of it, though, is like, how much of this market is being driven by the speculators right now, and by the Gary V watcher, the Gary V hustlers out there who don't have an interest in Pokemon specifically, but are interested in sort of flipping and making money. And how much of this has been driven by that? What is your take on that stuff?
So just looking at the analytics from like Pokemon Price, one of the best websites you can look at for PSA cards, is that there actually hasn't been that much resistance to the new prices. Like, we saw the initial spike, and then we've still maintained a higher volume of sales even with the new prices. So that probably should tell you that there's a good amount of people who are still happy to pay these higher prices, which may mean it's new money, but it also shows a willingness to still get the cards even at these higher price points. So that's the thing that surprised me the most. I thought we'd see an initial spike, and then we would see a lot of price resistance straight away. Like what we said earlier with some of our friends who are just holding off. They're just waiting to see the dust settle, but no dust is settling at all. It's just like a hurricane out there, because there's a higher volume of sales despite the higher prices almost across the board. So everyone's just trying to like get in on it almost. It feels like, because there was that initial growth, it's almost caused more eyes to all sort of divert towards this hobby. It's not just been the collectors who have been here for a while, or even some of the newer collectors who are just getting in. It's people are buying cards for more than just collection purposes now at a much, much higher rate than it previously was, it feels like, at least.
I think, like, in response to that, or sort of another way that I would maybe explain the fact that the numbers are holding for now. One, I would say it's a very short time period.
Of course.
And two, I know personally people who are doing buyouts right now. And I wonder how many of those cards are being bought by a single person, or by groups
Sure.
of people. And I think that the reality of that sort of thing, I mean, all of this is so psychological. Like what a piece of cardboard is worth in this hobby. You know, it's not like you're buying a stock and there are at least like reports of the earnings of that company. And you could be like, okay, like the stock is going up a lot, but their earnings are down. What's happening? You know, what's going on here? Like this is a purely emotionally driven thing, the value of these cards. And because of that, I think that we're all so susceptible to people who are trying to make money basically off of emotions, to use those tactics against people and to make people feel like they've all disappeared, to make people, you know, like how many hardcore collectors who really want these cards forever, who aren't just buying them to then sell them in the future, are buying those cards right now. And the reason I'm a little concerned about it, to be honest, is because of like everything I'm hearing from people. Like I'm not hearing everyone like you, Joe, who I talk to tends to be holding off.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I'm holding off. It's like the people who seem to be flooding in and buying are the new people who maybe just discovered, right? And they love their cards. You know, but a lot of them seem to be buying with this idea that it's going to continue to go up or at least hold the value. And I worry that some of those people are lying to themselves. And they say that I'm buying this because I love this card, because I want this card and it's worth this value to me. But really, it's I want this card, but only if it stays within this range. Like if they knew it was going to go way back down, for example, they would never have bought it in the first place if they were being honest. And I think it's about honest self-assessment when you're asking yourself that question. And like for me, I'm not buying because I don't want the cards at those prices. Right. Because if it came all the way back down, I'd be like, that was a lot of money I spent on that. I could have gone on like a wonderful vacation with my girlfriend for that money.
Right.
And like at the end of the day, they're Pokemon. Like I love Pokemon cards and I have a Pokemon YouTube channel, but it's like this is one way to spend your money in one part of life. And I do wonder how much of the prices, even for your collectors, are driven by that investment mindset, and that this is going to follow sports. It's going to follow these sorts of things. And I'm not saying, like, I think over time that can happen, but I think it's all about, you actually need the collectors who believe the cards are worth that much for them and don't plan on selling them. You need a lot of those, I think, to drive the market to some degree. You know, that being said, I mean, flippers can sell and resell to each other and drive a market way up, and it may never come back down, because even collector types, they get those price memories, you know, that price memory in their head, you know, and so they even, so now it's gone, even if it comes back down 20 to 30%, now it feels like a deal, even though it's not really a deal. It was driven up by the flippers and speculators, and, you know, the collectors the whole time were just sort of sitting and waiting for that to happen. So what are your you know, thoughts on all of that?
Well, I think one potential benefit actually of having new eyes towards this sort of hobby is that there's been a lot of assessment on, you know, the value of these cards, and some sort of like macro demographic things that people are sort of latching onto as a long-term thing, which I'm sure some of us had like in the back of our minds, but now people are using that as their reasoning for buying a card. Even if they think it's way, way higher, they're saying this could be, you know, a drop in the bucket compared to 10 years time, because look at what it's done the last 3 years, something like that. So I think a lot of people are convincing themselves of that. And I think it has helped some people stay a bit more confident of their sort of top tier collectibles. And I think it does show a good progression of the hobby and projection. But the thing that most concerns me is that although we have this sort of knowledge or respect for Pokemon as a brand and where it could be in 10 years time, I feel like the actual hobbyists, the actual people in our age demographic, don't really have the capital yet to make these sorts of commitments, because it's larger, it's much larger portions. Like if you just look at averages of earnings, you're now talking, you know, like for certain cards, I mean, yes, you could save up for certain cards and get them in a year's time if you're like very stringent and have a good job and all that sort of stuff. But we're in a spot where globally there's a lot of instability right now anyway. So, you don't know when there could be another spike in the virus, or you don't know if something happens with your job. There's just like natural insecurity everywhere right now. So also putting yourself in much greater risk is so bizarre to me. It felt like most people thought prices would go down because people wouldn't want to put themselves in a position like this. So they weren't just living month to month,
Yeah.
and you had a bit more protection in that regard. So that's the thing that really shocks me, is that it doesn't it feels like there should almost be some market fatigue soon, where people they've almost gone like purchase drunk, and they've like bought everything they can in the last like 3 or 4 months, and then there'll be like almost a halting stop because we almost need to like recoup our own funds, or otherwise people are selling stuff that they haven't before and sort of maneuvering their collection a lot more, which I think a lot of people are doing, because otherwise I was kind of expecting a halt in sales volume a lot earlier than it has, because I haven't really seen a big dip in sales volume yet. And that's still the thing that surprises me most, the actual amount of sales at these higher prices. That's the thing that gives me the most cause for concern, I think, because it just feels very risky right now. And it doesn't make sense to me as someone, I mean, I've, not been furloughed or anything like that. I've been working this whole time. My expenses are down, but I'm still thinking like anything could happen in the next 6 months, year. We're probably going to be in an economic recession. Like the UK has already announced that they're in a recession. So times are pretty tumultuous. I don't know why you'd be committing more than ever towards cardboard at the end of the day.
Yeah, particularly at this rate and speed.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's like, I've made, I think 5 purchases in the last 5 months, something like that, very sort of like tactical purchases that I feel like cards didn't, were way undervalued,
Sure.
versus other things, trying to complete my collection, these sorts of things. And I think, I think that there is there are going to be people out there who like just came back in and had no cards. And they're like, I'm so afraid that I'm never going to have any of these. And so I need to buy like as many of them as quickly as possible. You or me are in a position where it's easier, I think, to be patient because we have a portion of the cards we want already. And if I never had another Pokemon card, I would still be very happy. Like if I never bought another one, I'm very satisfied and happy with my collection already. So it's very easy to, from my perspective, to be like, be cautious. So I understand and respect that mindset, and of like, I just want these. And if you have the money, go for it. I think every market is established by a combination of, collectors, speculators, all these sorts of things. So it's not saying, so I think, another thing to say is like, is it bad? And maybe we should phrase it like that. And I'd love to hear your opinion. Is this price spike going to be bad for the hobby overall? If it's driven up by speculators, is that going to be a bad thing or going to be a good thing overall? And what are the benefits and the negatives to it?
Well, I think the first thing to say is there's always been speculators in the market, I would say. It's just been a much lower volume, and to make, margins were so much smaller when people were doing flips like in previous years. Like prices have crept up bit by bit, for certainly some items. And people have always been making money in this hobby. There's no doubt about that. There are people who don't have jobs outside of just, selling cards and stuff. So there's always been this element, and there's always enough demand for people to sort of make a living out of cards if they really want to. So I don't think it's anything we haven't seen before. It's just the ratios is the thing that's making me a little nervous, where people are more and more so looking to see those big, like $1,000 or whatever jumps of certain items and thinking that they're some sort of business guru overnight because a market's gone one way for them. So I feel like there's a lot of unsophisticated investment strategies that are being rewarded recently out of luck more often than not. And it gives people a lot of false confidence. And even if you end up back at square one at the end of it all. I think it, emotionally will feel very different to have earned X amount and then lost X amount compared to just a regular trundling along this whole time. So that's the main emotional fear that I have for the hobby.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head for me, at least in my opinion. It's about confidence. It's about emotional confidence. It's confidence that this hobby is made up of lots of collectors who have money and are willing to buy the cards at any point at the prices that they're going for, and that there are lots of those. That natural demand. I think that that for me, it becomes a question of, and let me ask you this, like do you have doubles in your collection? Do you have things, are you selling now? Is that something that you think about? What is that like for you, Joe? What's that process like for you?
So I'm in the process right now of grading a lot of doubles. Over the last 5 months, I haven't purchased a single card, but I've sent out about 1,000 cards for grading. And this is really because I still have my own collection goals. And my main decision is to sell cards that I'm less involved with, or like you say, doubles, triples, etc., to gain that capital. Because my previous strategy of saving a portion of my earnings, each month or whatever towards cards is kind of out the window now because of how expensive certain items have got, and I unfortunately have expensive WotC first edition taste. So if I still want to continue having these cards, I will have to leverage some of the stuff that I already do own. So I've hoarded for the last 12 years. I literally haven't sold any cards. It's out of laziness and it's out of genuine just hoarding mentality. I literally even keep the booster packets. It's the point where I could now sell my empty Skyridge booster box for the price that I bought a full Skyridge booster box. That's the strange world that we live in now, because packets can sell for £3 empty these days, and the box can sell for 100 or so. So it gives you scope of how long I've been in the hobby in some regards, but also it's very bizarre. And I've never really had to think about these things before this time, because they've just been showpieces that I've liked and then memories of when I open these cards, etc. So it's very strange for me to start almost graduating from this hoarder collector that's sort of been just on my own doing this the whole time, to now, trying to graduate into being more sophisticated, more market aware, trying to sell off cards that I think will grow slower than cards that I'm picking up, so that even if I am selling a card and I feel bad that that card then changes in value, I'm hoping that the cards that I'm purchasing will also hold a decent value in the right range anyway. As long as it's in a range, I don't feel like I'll miss out. So I'm having to, for once, be much more tactical about what I'm grading, what I'm holding, what I'm selling, etc. But as of yet, I'm still connected even to doubles and triples in my collection, so I haven't even sold those yet.
Me too.
So that's just, yeah.
So I guess, my follow-up question on that is, for you, do you feel like it's detrimental to your enjoyment of the hobby to be having more of those tactical thoughts, to feel that pressure to be tactical with your collection from a financial perspective? Or does that add an element that you like? And like, how do you balance that? And what advice maybe also would you give to people to sort of balance that struggle that a lot of us might be going through right now?
Yeah, well, I can't deny that I've enjoyed seeing cards that I own be valued by other people in such a way, which is just really cool to see that if these sales are genuine, if people are desiring these cards as much as I do, I'm overjoyed that there's that many people and that much want for the same cards that I adore is excellent. So if that's all happening, I'm very happy for the hobby, and long may it continue. But it has caused a lot of not really sleepless nights, but a lot of my time is now being dedicated to all sorts of different parts of my collection that I've previously been happy to ignore and just sort of let be a thing, literally commons and uncommons that have been left under the bed are now assets to me, and it's part of a portfolio that I have now. And it's these are all things that I'm having to spend a lot more time with. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We all enjoy, looking at our collection, but looking at cards in a different way now, seeing, dollar bills next to every single thing you own is a very different way of looking at them. And I don't think it takes away from the enjoyment of the cards, as long as you're still liking the cards for what they are, etc. But it really adds an element of wanting to let go of these sorts of things, because prices are a way that they are now, and it could end up being, for some people, life-changing money, or just extra leeway right now to give yourself a margin of safety. And I go back to that fact that I feel that's quite important in the times that we're at right now. If you can give yourself a nice margin of safety for a year or so, it will hopefully relieve a lot of your anxiety in your day-to-day life.
Yeah. I think like my perspective is like, we are in a stressful time because, whenever a market has intense growth or intense, negative growth, decrease in value, you're going to see a lot of like anxiety and stress, and there can definitely be excitement as well. But as you said, there can be that sort of exhaustion with that. I think that can come in because it deserves so much attention and energy and focus, all of this stuff, that at one point you were like, it's just an extra $5. Like, I'll just buy that pack, or like when you started, it's like, I can buy any booster box for not that much. And, it's just a day's work, at my job or whatever. I think that when I think of like, how are we going to all coexist, be honest with each other, and also help build the hobby, both financially, but also I think even more importantly with just like enjoyment of the cards and more people coming in. It seems so important, like how we all treat each other within the hobby in terms of the different sort of people and factions within the hobby, like your reseller business, group versus your sort of like, longer term maybe versus like your shorter term kind of flipper reseller, your sort of collector, your investor, your person who's just like angry at all these, completely angry, like furious at all these prices. Right. And, and I hear people like, I think I'm upset that people are attacking each other. Like I'm upset that people are attacking the person who's furious that all the prices are going up, because of course they're furious to me. They're furious because they wanted these cards and they don't have that much money. It's like the most human thing in the world, and they wanted to own them, and maybe they don't make enough and they wanted it. And wealthy people can be like, ha ha ha, you person who didn't have it, but I don't like that. But I also don't think it's fair for people like that to attack people on the other side who are making a business out of this, who are supporting their livelihood. And for me, what I like is for everyone to be honest with their intentions. Like, that's where I come from. And I'd love to hear your opinion, but it's like, if you're like, I'm a business and I treat this as a business and I'm looking to sell to collectors, great. That's, then we can know who you are and we know what you're doing, and you can be multiple things. But I think that we're going through a transition period where everyone, or almost everyone, is becoming not just a collector, but a collector investor. Like, there's so few people that I think are not having the mindset and that mindset anymore of value or thinking about value. And I wonder, like how do you feel about, I guess, what I just said, the various factions getting together, and like how you think about also like the new collectors versus the old collectors, and maybe the old collectors being like very condescending to the new collectors. Like, there's a lot of that stuff that I see. And then I see a lot of like people being really respectful and positive and welcoming. So it's a mixed bag for sure.
Yeah, I think part of the reason like older collectors are not so respecting of newer collectors or whatever, or a little bit harsher or look down on newer collectors, is for some reason in the back of their head, sometimes they're thinking they're part of the reason that prices may have gone up for their own collection goals. Sometimes they can even be jealous of an Instagram post of a card that someone who's been in the hobby for a year has that you never got yourself or never pulled or whatever else. So I think Instagram culture has had an influence on that. I think it's so much shop window stuff going on right now. I don't do a lot of social media at all. I don't have an Instagram or anything like that, so I try and keep away from it personally. But I've heard stories, and I've also seen that can cause some anxiety as well. That you're thinking that your own Instagram page isn't active enough, and it could be a reason for you to buy a card even sometimes as well, just to fit in with the crowd or something like that, which is just a bizarre feeling in itself, to be honest. But I feel like it's not necessarily all bad, I would say. And I really do also respect that we now have this insight into being more financially aware. Hopefully, with enough good advice out there, people will budget more correctly and not overextend themselves. As long as the right message is out there, I feel like it can only help collectors in future. And looking towards other hobbies, it may feel like Pokemon's got to a point of no return, because the barrier to entry isn't always money now. It's mostly just knowledge. And I think that's a good thing to have, because we don't have any other barrier to entry otherwise. So looking towards sports cards and Magic and just how intricate those markets can be, tons of Pokemon people would never look towards the Magic market at all because it's so unfamiliar to them. That can also, it may eventually be that Pokemon is also in that regard. I know there are obvious aspects that people will ignore. Some people only focus on vintage, some people only focus on modern, because it's a lot of work to do that, all of that investigation and work for yourself. Otherwise you could just fall into pitfalls straight away because you don't know the right valuations or whatever else of cards. So I think becoming more aware and more discussion on this stuff, it does appeal to the investor side more than the collector side, which is a shame for how much we all actually feel about the cards that we're talking about half the time. But I'm hoping that it's informative enough to actually give people cause to think more about their actions when they are buying these cards.
I think for me, like, my greatest concern at the end of the day is the modern.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though I think that like there's a lot of buyouts and speculation driving up the prices on vintage Wizards of the Coast stuff, first edition base uncommon commons, if you've been watching, are crazy, particularly the starters. That growth doesn't make any sense. I'm just going to throw it out there. So
but you can buy almost a full holo set of jungle for like one Charmander or something. Not hating on Charmander, I know you recently got one.
Yeah, but
but you know what I mean, right?
And again,
it doesn't
I
make
got
sense.
What price did I get that
exactly,
for? I got an entire first edition uncommon common rare set with all of the rares in like 9s and other 10s for 1,700, and people are just buying. And there was the PSA 10 Charmander, and then people are just buying that. And I bought that 3 weeks ago. So
yeah, and you can get like 10 Charmanders in a box, and you get like not a single holo in a box that you would get. So
a lot of that card, it's extremely easy to grade. It's like 50-50 in the pop report. The one good thing I'll throw out there, as we're kind of tangenting into finance, PSA is, in my opinion, PSA is starting to grade harder. And I'm seeing it upticking across a lot of different sets right now. And so that is a good news. So for a lot of those cards where we're seeing a lot of that even 10-9 split, it is changing a little bit for people who own 10s. And that's something that PSA is probably doing for their own reasons. But it also I think is will be good for people who own 10s. But putting that aside, going back to the modern, versus that vintage, like these vintage cards, like the booster boxes, like they're so expensive that it's so difficult to put more of that onto the market. And these things are so iconic, and you're going to have the oldest and wealthiest people interested in base set, very, very likely in the Pokemon hobby. And so there's just going to be a lot more money to buy out all the Charmanders. Like one person could just try to buy out like as many as possible all the time. If they have like millions of dollars, right? They could just buy, which can hold that price up. When we're looking at like the modern and just your average person storing like hundreds of sealed product boxes that they're buying at retail. They're not even getting them at like the distributor prices that a business would get, you know, where they're going to save a little bit less. Like that has not made anybody money, like in any other that I'm aware of, in any other collectible. Like when we look at, and the difference between Pokemon and that is like Magic the Gathering, part of why my understanding is part of why like the boxes and Rudy from Alpha Investments like model works is like there's people like opening the boxes and like playing with the cards.
Yes.
I don't, you can talk about that playable side, but do you see people opening like all these Sun and Moon, X and Y, like wanting, like if there's so much extra, like, you know, Sword and Shield boxes out there one day, do you see people who are playing the game right now opening those boxes if they're like $500 or $400 a box, or even like double the price, $200 a box, just for the playability side? Or will they just play the new stuff that's in the format because they want to compete and that's what they want to do?
I think for a playability side, almost always no, because there's already been so much product opened that you will always be able to get the loose cards from all of those sets already, and they will always be far, far cheaper than any sealed boxes, even at today's prices. So people who are interested in old format, it's, you know, it's a very small percentage. It's very niche already, and people can get it for a fraction of the price. And to be honest, if you're a player, opening boxes is really, really bad because there's only like 1 or 2 good cards in most sets, and you need to get 4 copies of cards if they're very playable and strong, and you have a chance of getting one sometimes from a box. So I can't ever see myself, who loves old format, by the way. I have an old format collection for myself. I have friends who are building old format collections. We will only buy singles. We've never been like, I want to go back to the XY era. Let me go ahead and buy 3 XY based boxes. It's going to be no. Let me go and buy 3 Trevenants and 3 Yveltal EXs for like £1 a piece or something. You know, you are never going to get people wanting those to play, in my opinion.
And do you, as a collector, do you want 100 Burning Shadows booster boxes sitting around in your house that you can't ever open because they're too expensive? Like, is that excite you?
I opened a lot of Burning Shadows when it was released. It was a very playable set, and it had a Charizard chase. So I enjoyed Burning Shadows when it was out. Really did enjoy it. I think it was an amazing set. One of the best Sun and Moon sets out there. Probably top 3 Sun and Moon sets in my eyes at the time. But that's been and gone. And I'm way more happy to continue getting my fill of newer stuff as they come out as well. And again, if you're looking at it from a playability standpoint, it was a decent format. There was a lot of good cards in that box, but you can always have a surplus of singles anywhere. So I won't ever look back towards Burning Shadows myself. And this is from someone who even missed the Charizard from all of my attempts, you know?
And if you want it, you'll buy the Charizard.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and so my point in that is that is what scares me. That is a speculator move. I don't think a collector wants hundreds of sealed product boxes and that makes them happy. Mm-hmm. Now there might be people out there, if you really ask yourself, and it's like, I'm happy that I just have this like warehouse of like sealed product in my house. It's like, okay, like fine. You know, and you know, Z from Z&G and I like talk about this. Like, I don't really like booster boxes that much, so I might be biased. Like, when I see a booster box, I'm like, let's open it. Like, even the vintage ones, you know, outside of a few that I think are really cool looking and have like really unique art. Like, I like the base set box because of the Charizard on it and because of the plastic. Cool. Like, I just like the art style and the feel. But for me, it's very dependent on the art style, whether I want that box itself.
And modern boxes don't look good.
No, they're boring. Interestingly, I think the Elite Trainer boxes, some of them are kind of cooler.
More collector pieces in a way. Yeah.
Right. And so if you want to collect modern that's actually going to be collectible as something that you don't need to open, you know, maybe. But there's so many of them. And they're selling at Walmart and Target, right? And they're sitting there. And so there's so much, like when I see the movement on Shining Legends, when I see the movement, you know, a set where I see people with hundreds of those cards, like those Shining cards sitting in, you know, that was, you could buy those packs all day, every day at Target, Walmart, you know, for a long time. When I see the, you know, Hidden Fates Elite Trainer box, and Hidden Fates, right, is the most collectible set, right? Not, you know, that is the set that people are going to remember and want to collect, I believe.
Yeah.
But like, when you see people hoarding that product, it's sort of like, I mean, I that is what happened in, a lot of other in comics and in a lot of other sorts of things. Now it's different because comics didn't have the sealed product, but people buying a lot of the product with the idea that like these are going to be super valuable. And when lots of people have that same idea and start doing it, the only thing that wins is the Pokemon company. The Pokemon company is the big winner because they sell a lot more product.
Yeah. I think a bigger thing to remember as well is that half of the reason that opened and graded vintage cards only have a premium because of how many of those cards were destroyed and damaged because we were all kids at the time. Now, like, anyone who opens any booster pack is probably sleeving any GX or shiny or whatever card immediately. So just the raw number of copies of the individual cards will always keep the modern stuff at a cap. Like, there's no doubt about that. And as much as people do enjoy the thrill of opening and the thrill of chasing certain cards and not knowing, etc., it does carry a premium. It has for a bunch of sets. I feel like that is always going to be a connection between the raw card values and what you can pull, because no one's going to be opening packs if it's always a losing game 100% of the time. Even first ed base, it's a losing game, but you can get wins. People will get lucky and hit a 10 of whatever Pokemon or hit a good species of certain sets. So the gambling element has to have a payoff, and the more and more of these sets get opened, and the more mint copies are out there. Like, every modern set will have a ton more mint copies than we will have in vintage forever because of how many of the copies that we naturally destroyed as kids because they were in our lunchbox or pocket or played in the mud, whatever. That just doesn't happen with modern anymore because everything's instantly sleeved, top loaded, put away, like graded that year basically, which is just very bizarre to me. It's a very strange subculture that's going on.
Yeah. So I think we should probably end the video pretty soon, because it's probably a pretty good length, and and if we do too much, I'm not sure people will get as much value from it, and we'll talk again in the future. But I guess to end here, my question for you is, can you say something maybe hopeful, something that you feel hopeful about within Pokemon? And I can give you a second, and I can go first, and you can end the video with that.
You shoot
to think about it. But I think for me, the what I find hopeful, like in starting my YouTube channel, I've met a lot more people who are super interested in it, who are super nice and super helpful, and very willing to share their information and help others. And that's made me feel good about I think that exists a lot in the Pokemon card world. And I do think that I think that a lot of these people are going to be here to stay for the long term. And I think that what I'm hoping for is when we see retraces, which we will see, when we see those 20%, 15%, 10% retraces or 30% retraces, that'll actually be a really nice reset, an emotional reset for a lot of people. And you're going to see collectors get comfortable again buying more. And that's going to reestablish a floor and is going to then help us grow again financially over time. So I do see, if that pattern can happen, and then I do see that sort of a healthy boom and bust cycle, we're going to see consumer confidence grow again in everyone, including people like me, who might be I might be on sort of the more skeptical side of things. I think there are people who are far more negative than I am and think everything's just going to crash and that these prices are insane. But I think that's my take on it, is that if we see that, do not panic. Do not worry. That's a good thing. That actually means that I think people are behaving more sensibly and more like collectors and not just investor speculators. And that the more people there are who are like that, the more this hobby is going to actually sustain itself for a long time. And as we get older and we actually have more money, the collectors actually hopefully do move in their career, you are going to see higher prices for these sorts of things. So
Yeah, I would say this was almost something like a social experiment where we've got to look behind the curtain of what it could have been in 10 years' time, in a way, with an unnatural means of us all having, to an extent, some more disposable income, that we will sometimes commit that sort of money towards this hobby. So it shows that there is a good amount of genuine interest out there, and people are still really desiring these cards. I think there will be people who have still bought, who have been buying and will continue to keep buying into this hobby. And I can't see that going anywhere. Pokemon is going on in leaps and bounds. The latest video game sold almost as well as the original games, for the Nintendo Switch. The brand is extremely, extremely strong and profitable. Pokemon, I don't think will, go out of anyone's memory in the next 50 years, probably, because we're all going to have our own childhood memories and new generations. The focus of Pokemon is so much towards the younger hobby. Although they appease older collectors a good amount of times, they are always focused on the youngest generation. And that's the best way to maintain a hobby and keep it fresh for new people coming in as well. So I think with their model, it really does, it will help Pokemon stand the test of time. And I think there's actually some exciting years ahead for the hobby, with an anniversary coming up, that it could be a new point, almost like when Evolutions came out. We could be getting some great celebratory, interesting, unique sets coming in the future that could, reestablish the love of Pokemon for a lot of new people once again. So this isn't necessarily the largest market size we'll ever have for the hobby. There are always people rediscovering Pokemon for one reason or another. It could even be a macroeconomic thing of just our demographic. In 10 years' time, we'll all have children and we'll be opening product with them. So there's a ton of reason to expect Pokemon to continue to be strong for a good amount of time, even if prices can, fluctuate here and there over the years.
I think that's a great, important point. So many good points there. The point about the dads collecting with their kids type of thing, or mothers collecting with their kids too.
I see it all the time. Even dads are learning to play the game. People just get involved. Yeah,
huge. So I guess one final short question, and then we'll end, because I'm really interested to know because you have, I think, a lot more. You've been in the game so much longer than me and have a lot more connections than I do. Do you know any sort of middle class collectors who have been in the game for a while who are buying into this market?
Yes, without being too open and giving names or anything like that.
You don't have to give names.
I know a good amount of people have continued to accept these prices, knowing that these are still cards that they've always desired. So it's still happening with genuine interest for at least some people. Yeah.
And I think right, that point is so important, because I think that the fact that people are doing that is a great sign that it's unlikely that we're going to retrace that much. The more data points are like that. So thank you so much for coming on today. Great chatting with you.
No problem. I've really enjoyed it.
And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, Joe. Bye.